Our newest live trial, the brother and sister murder trial.
Karen and Michael Murray are both charged with the murder and neglect of their mother, Sheila Murray.
And prosecutors say the 68-year-old died after she was admitted to the hospital in 2019, prompting the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation to look into her death.
And now her two children stand accused of her murder. We want to go in now for the start of the state's opening statement.
Before we go, quick warning, it is pretty graphic.
Thank you.
So be prepared.
Please take care of me. On August the 10th of 2019, John Shelton and Joshua Jenkins, an EMT and a paramedic with the Washington County Johnson City Emergency Medical Services, responded to a call at 1405 East Hunega Avenue in Johnson City, Tennessee. The call went out as a non-emergent call. When they arrived at the home, they were greeted at the door by an elderly gentleman who you will later learn was Edwin Murray, the husband of Sheila Murray. As Shelton went to obtain information from the family, Jenkins went back to a room down the hallway on the left where Sheila Murray was. It was evident to him when he entered that room that this was an emergency call. Now, what also greeted both of them at that door was the smell of feces and urine. And as they walked further into the house, the scent, the odor increased. Immediately upon entering that room and seeing what he saw, paramedic Jenkins radioed for additional help. Shelton stepped over and said, "How is she?" About the same time that Jenkins is radioing, and Jenkins says, "You need to see for yourself." So what did Shelton see? He saw a 68-year-old Sheila Murray lying on a hospital bed. On that bed was feces at various stages of drying. Mold had began to form on some of that feces. Also in that hospital bed with her was urine at various stages of drying. Some had crystallized, some had dried to the point that it turned the bed dark brown. Looking at Sheila Murray's right leg, at her ankle, the tibia was sticking out. The bone was dark. There was no active bleeding. There was feces around her foot and the wound. Her right eye was matted shut from discharge. Various stages of drying. She had candidiasis, which you will learn is yeast growing around her neck. That's how they found her. Fire department came to assist. They were going to attempt what's called a draw sheet removal. So they pulled a sheet from the ambulance. This time the odor so strong that at one point EMT Shelton thought he was going to vomit. They work, one person stabilizes the foot. They put a pillow on it, they stabilize it so when they get ready to move her, there's as little movement as possible for the leg. And when they began to move her on that sheet, she screams. They're able to get her in the ambulance. And while on the trip to 1405 East Unega, it was just Shelton and Jenkins. En route to the hospital, where they've already called to say we've got a trauma 2 coming in, there's a firefighter driving the ambulance. There's Shelton, Jenkins, and another firefighter in the back providing assistance. And you'll hear testimony from Shelton and Jenkins about what was going on in the back there, in the back of the ambulance on the way. They arrived to Johnson City Medical Center. The attending physician was Dr. Christy Lawson. Dr. Christy Lawson, through her video deposition, will tell you that the person up front who did the intake for Sheila had written on her history that she'd had a mastectomy. But when they got her undressed, what they realized was that her breast had been caught up under her arm. And it had been up under there for so long that there was necrosis of that right breast. They will tell you, you will hear about the condition she was in when she arrived at the hospital, what efforts they made to clean her up, and what additional injuries it caused in trying to clean her up. You'll hear Dr. Lawson talk about the bed sores, particularly a bed sore to the upper right shoulder that had necrosis to the bone. She will tell you that that leg was dead when Miss Sheila Murray arrived at the hospital. She'll tell you what they did to try to help her, what they weren't able to do because of the previous care she had received. You'll learn that there was a surrogate, medical surrogate, provided for her to make medical decisions about her health, because the hospital had concerns about the way she had arrived there. You'll hear how on July the 16th, Sheila Murray died because she wouldn't have been able to survive the surgery required for amputating that leg, that there was sepsis. So they offered palliative care. You'll hear Dr. Lawson talk about how she knew that Sheila Murray was still able to know what was going on because her eyes would track her in the hospital. And that on one particular occasion, Dr. Lawson had this habit of when her patients seemed to be in pain, she would rub their forehead. And as she did that, she saw a tear slip out of Sheila Murray's eye. And she said, "You're in the hospital. We're going to take care of you." You'll hear from Sonia Henry, the third child of Sheila Murray, who lives outside of Chattanooga. You'll hear her talk about her mother, about the person she was, about her mother's health, about what she knew about who was taking care of her mom, what their responsibilities were, how much information she had. She'll tell you about a visit she had in February of 29, because her mom's birthday was in February. She'll tell you that she was able to arrive at the hospital and visit with her mom. And you'll learn what she knew at that time what she had been told, and then what she saw. You'll hear from Kathleen Morris, who's with the Adult Protective Services. You'll learn how her agency became involved, what their concerns were. You'll hear where she asked questions in the interviews of Karen and Michael Murray. You'll hear about what her experience has been in these type of cases. And then you'll hear from Tracy Roman. Tracy Roman was a nurse practitioner. The doctor's office, the primary care doctor for Sheila Murray, would send out the nurse practitioner because you'll learn that Miss Murray wasn't able to come to the hospital. So she got home visits. You'll learn what Tracy Romans checked for, what she looked for, what the condition of Sheila Murray was at that last visit on March 4th of 2019. You'll learn that there was another visit that was supposed to be scheduled for June of 2019, but that appointment was canceled by Karen Murray. You'll hear from Brian Pritchard, Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. You'll hear him explain why the TBI was called in to investigate this case. And one of those reasons is because the husband of Sheila Murray was a former Johnson City Police Department officer, retired. And so Johnson City requested that the district attorney ask the TBI to investigate so there wouldn't be any question about the integrity of the investigation. During the course of this trial, you'll learn that Edwin Murray, the husband, passed away 3 months after Sheila Murray. Through the testimony of TBI agent Pritchard and his interviews with Karen Murray and Michael Murray, you'll hear their account of the care that they provided for their mother. You'll hear about never thinking that simple bed sores could be life-threatening. You'll hear about how often she was changed. You will hear that on August the 10th of 2019, Sheila Murray laid in her bed till around 5:30 or 6 o'clock, never being changed, not once. Around 5:30 or 6, according to the statements in the interview, they went to check on her. And that's when they saw the bone sticking out of her ankle. It hadn't been there the day before, but nobody really knows how that happened, but it was there. 8:36, EMS arrives. At the conclusion of the trial, you will be empowered with the evidence, the law in the form of jury instructions, and the common sense that you bring to this table. And you will be asked to go back and deliberate on 3 charges. 3 charges that center around one word. One word that is the very opposite of care, and that is neglect.
All right, Michael, the reality is I thank you for letting not only our audience know it would be graphic, but me as well. You had an opportunity, you were listening earlier, I was on air, wasn't able to. You know, you have to wonder how two people can go to trial on a set of facts like this because it's so horrific. You just think they've got to be found guilty.
I don't know if I've ever heard of conditions of a human being that bad. You know, we've been, dealing with the system for 30, 40 years. I don't know, and I know you had intimate dealings with this type of crime, this type of situation. This is one of the worst things I've ever heard. I don't even know where you go as far as the defense is concerned.
You just can't take away from those facts. So still joining us for this hour, we're glad to have Deputy Public Defender Philip Dubé, because that leads to my question for you, Philip, which is, how do you defend this terrible set of facts?
Well, first of all, there are several elements. And by the way, I hope you both are well. They have to establish that these kids were, in fact, her caregiver. You know, just because a parent has adult kids doesn't create this special relationship under the law where criminal liability attaches merely because something happens to the parent. Absent a caregiver type relationship where they have knowingly neglected either a vulnerable or, just an elderly parent, I'm not sure that it's a criminal act. If you're just kids checking in on mom, making sure she's okay, I don't even think there's a duty to act on her behalf unless she is in fact in your care. And I believe that is the law in Tennessee, not just with respect to the homicide, but also that second count of aggravated abuse or aggravated elder neglect. So I would try to make sure that the prosecution establishes beyond a reasonable doubt that these kids were in fact her caregiver. If in fact they were the caregiver and mom refused all medical care, then it becomes really a battle of the rights. In other words, are mom's rights superior to the rights of the state of Tennessee in ensuring that the caregivers not neglect or otherwise take advantage of a vulnerable or elderly parent? And I think at that point it becomes a philosophical debate. So we have to wait and see if they were in fact caregivers and if mom in fact refused care.
Well, what role does the fact, and you mentioned it, that the state has some role in this? I think one of the things we're going to hear is that they couldn't afford to put her in a nursing home. They didn't have the type of training needed to deal with some of her issues and problems as far as her illnesses were concerned. The state, do they have some role in this that can be sort of handed off by the defense and say, look, they did the best they could, the state dropped the ball?
Only if she was in fact in the care of the state. So in other words, if a case file had been opened up, let's say for elder dependent care where they offer subsidies to the kids, or maybe they had sought some type of, I know under United States Medicare law, you can seek what's called long-term hospice. And what that means is you don't have to be in the end stages of life. You just have to have a qualifying illness where you can't care for yourself, and the government will provide all the services to you. They will bring it either to your board and care or to your home, wherever you are, as long as you have been classified as a long-term hospice care patient. If she never got the benefit of that classification and the kids didn't have the means, what are they supposed to do?
That's the question.
It is the question. It's a horrible case. Of course, we'll be back with more of that. But you may note the clock has stopped in the retrial. Karen Reed, the jury has a question at 2 hours, 43 minutes. We're going to update you as soon as we know more. And of course, still ahead, the defense presents their opening statement in the brother-sister murder trial. Stay with us.
Tonight on Closing Arguments, is Karen Reed a killer girlfriend or the scapegoat in an elaborate cover-up? We're breaking down today's closing arguments as deliberations get underway.
Closing Arguments, tonight at 8/7 Central, only on Court TV.
A-list actor Alec Baldwin is cast in the real-life role he never wanted.
I turn a cop to the gun goes off.
Criminal defendant.
The Alec Baldwin manslaughter trial, coming this July, only on Court TV.
Hello and welcome back. As we mentioned before the break, the jury out there in Dedham, Massachusetts had a question for the court. It looks like the shot is up currently, so I want to take you out there live and hear what they have to ask. So the jury had been deliberating for 2 hours and 43 minutes when they sent a note out saying that they had a question. Remember, Karen Reed is charged in the death of her then boyfriend, John O'Keefe, a former, or at the time was a Boston police officer.
And that's right. Now, I don't think this will be the question. 2 hours, 43 minutes. I think it's just going to be clarification about a legal term or something they want to see or look at from the evidence. That's most likely. But I have to wonder, in a case like this where the public is so divided, if the jury too is divided and already says, we're not going to agree, we disagree on a verdict.
That may be somewhere down the line. Again, I agree with you. 2 hours and 43 minutes seems a little short for that. There's a lot to go through. I agree with you on the point that I think it's probably going to be some sort of clarification. And you know my theory on clarifications. If it's a judicial clarification about the definition of one of the charges or what something means, generally it doesn't take long after that to come to a verdict because there's some issue with that definition.
Right.
Once it's clarified, they can sort of move along and things tend to get solved at that point.
Yeah.
So that's just, I've seen that a lot in many cases.
Yeah, that's fair. I still think it's going to be, let's look at some evidence. We want to be able to read the text messages or look at this or that, you know, the video. That video where they blew it up and you can see the back of her car tap the back of John O'Keefe's car. I think some of those videos are ones they're going to want to request.
Interesting. So let me ask you this. We've watched this thing go for the last 30 odd days. What do you think is the best evidence the state has to show that she's guilty of any of the charges? All right, it looks like the jury's coming in. Let's get folks back out to the court.
Thank you. Be seated.
All right, jurors. So as you know, I sent you in a note at 4 o'clock asking if you wanted to go home and come back tomorrow. You said yes. I apologize. It took us so long to get everybody together to do this. So I'm going to excuse you for today. When you come back tomorrow, you will start again after coming into the courtroom. So I do have to give you those 3 cautions, and the cautions also concern the all time. So please do not discuss this case or any aspect of this case with anybody. Do not do any independent research or investigation into this case. If you happen to see, hear, or read anything about this case, please disregard it and let us know. You've all worked so hard for this last 8, 9, 10 weeks, however long it is. Let's just make sure that you continue to be as secure in how you've done things as you can. We really appreciate it. So we will see you tomorrow morning. Have a good night.
Both, all rise, jury up.
You know, Michael, I kind of want to eat my words and take back what I said because that's such an obvious reason
And we knew
they were coming back.
Producers had let us know that that question would be asked around that time.
Oops.
So we should have kind of known, but that's on us.
Yes. So tell me about, you were talking briefly just about the ruckus going on outside of this courtroom. It was loud.
Yes, a lot of folks outside. It seemed like a lot of them were Karen Reed supporters.
Yes.
Making things difficult for folks wanting to get into the courthouse. And I wonder, I mean, obviously there's probably a side door normally for jurors to leave. And there was a rule they couldn't be within 200 feet of the courthouse.
That's
so
right.
hopefully they're not affected by that and what's going on.
Yeah, I don't think they will be, but you're right. I mean, there is a lot going on, and I don't think that's going to diminish as they continue to deliberate tomorrow.
No, I agree. That's going to be around right through the verdict for sure.
I agree.
All right. We're going to step aside here, folks, and take a break. When we come back, we'll get you back out to Tennessee for the brother-sister murder trial. Keep it here on Court TV, your front row seat to justice.
Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Ashley Wilcott here with Michael Ayala. We are in Tennessee where 2 siblings are standing trial for the death of their own mother.
Both Karen and Michael Murray are charged with murder and neglect in the death of 68-year-old Sheila Murray, who died after being admitted to the hospital back in August of 2019.
We want to get you back into court for the start of the defense's opening statement. Now, they each have their own defense attorney, so this is the statement being made by the attorney for the defendant, Karen Murray.
Ladies and gentlemen, what this case comes down to is that phrase, knowingly neglect, and what you believe about that phrase. You know, in jury selection, we talked about how every offense has elements that the state has to prove. In this case, the underlying offenses both require the state to prove beyond a reasonable doubt neglect, and that neglect was done knowingly. And I'm going to address both of them in due course. Let me talk about the neglect aspect first. You're going to hear from several medical professionals, as General Ray said, and you're going to hear them use the term neglect in referring to what they perceived as they treated Mrs. Murray. One thing to keep in mind whenever you hear from these medical professionals is what they see, what they perceive is through the eyes of people who are trained to understand these things. They're trained to understand what they are seeing, to understand from a medical professional's standpoint that something is not appropriate care, that something is neglect to a medical definition of the word. You'll have to decide at the close of proof whether or not the state has proven neglect to the legal definition of that. And even if the state is able to do that, they still have to prove that it was done knowingly. When you hear from these medical professionals, you keep in mind that these are people that have education, experience, and resources at their disposal. They have the education and the experience from the people that you're going to hear from to recognize problems, big and small. Not just to recognize the problems that a layperson may not see, but to know what to do about those, to understand the severity of something, exactly what they're looking at, and then what to do about those problems. Further after that, what resources are necessary to remedy those problems. They have the ability to understand things to a degree that a layperson would not, that a layperson, even if recognizing some kind of problem, won't know the same way a medical professional will exactly the severity of that problem, and further won't know what to do anywhere near what a medical professional will. The Murrays had no medical training, anything. They were in a situation where they were trying to care for their mother. Sheila Murray, as she got older in years, she developed a host of health problems. She'd had a stroke. I think eventually she'd had several strokes. She'd had deep vein thrombosis. She'd had just a variety of things. She had a whole host of issues. You know, when this all started, what you'll hear about is in early 2018, the family noticed that Sheila Murray had a sudden change in her affect. She went from what they were used to with her, because at this point she'd had a stroke, I believe, in 2015, and it was affecting her her independence, her mobility, her speech were being affected even by this point. January 2018, she has something happen that the family notices. Her affect changes. She's not eating, they can't get her out of bed, so they take her to the hospital. They get her stabilized. I believe the records indicate that she was diagnosed with pneumonia. She had some complications from heart disease, which she had too, and complications from the stroke that she'd had. She was released to Cornerstone, which was a nursing home here in Johnson City. I believe it goes by a different name now, but jury selection, we talked about Appalachian Christian Village. It's that same building where Appalachian Christian Village once was. That's where Cornerstone was at the time. Miss Murray stayed there for the 20 days that were afforded to her by Medicare. And then the family had to make a decision about what to do. Mrs. Murray had decided that she wanted to go home. She didn't want to be in a nursing home. She didn't want to stay in a nursing home. The family took her home. Her husband, Edwin, you'll hear me call him Tony Murray because that's what he went by. But you hear Tony Murray or Edwin Murray, it's talking about the same person. Signed her out of Cornerstone, and they brought her home because they believed in the condition she was in at that point that they would be able to take care of her. At this point, she could still talk, she could still communicate, she could still get to the bathroom with a walker with some assistance. So here, they believed that they could take care of her at home. And as you'll hear Tony Murray talk about, they didn't have a lot of other options because they couldn't afford to put her in a nursing home. Nursing homes are very expensive, and Tony Murray did not believe that they had the capability to afford to put her in a nursing home. So looking at the situation, they thought it was best, let's bring her home, the condition she's in, we can take care of her. And that's what they did. And what you'll hear is that for a time, it was fine. You'll hear from Ms. Romans when she talks about the periodic visits. I think I had to ask her to make sure about this, but I think it was, she was coming as often as I think Medicare would pay for her. But she came every 3 months or so for a while and reported no real issues and weren't there, that everything was appropriate, that Ms. Murray was, she was frail, she had various problems that plagued her over the years. She had a history of falling out of bed. Even before she went to Cornerstone, she would work herself out of bed. And it's in the notes that Ms. Romans will talk about, that she had a history of that. But over time, Mrs. Murray started to degrade. This is bookended by two events, really, the timeline we're talking about here, when Sheila Murray goes into Cornerstone, and then the events of August 10th, 2019. And on both of those occasions, when the family realizes that something serious has happened, when they know something has happened, they took her to the hospital to begin with. And when they discovered the condition of her ankle, which I'm going to talk more about here in a minute, they called EMS to come out. The middle is where the family was in a trap that they didn't even realize they were in. They thought, we can take care of mom at home. We can provide to care for her at home. We can do this. But what they didn't realize was the slow progression of time, that decline that Sheila Murray suffered from day after day, week after week, month after month, until somewhere between the time that she went home after Cornerstone and the time that EMS responded in August 2019, there was a line crossed where this family was no longer able to take care of her like they thought they could. At some point, that line was crossed, and they didn't even know it. They didn't even realize that they had crossed this point where they were beyond what limited capabilities that they had to take care of Sheila Murray.
All right, we're going to hit the pause button. We'll have more of the defense opening statement when we come back. Stay with us, Court TV Live.
Tonight on Closing Arguments, is Karen Reed a killer girlfriend or the scapegoat in an elaborate cover-up? We're breaking down today's closing arguments as deliberations get underway.
Closing Arguments, tonight at 8/7 Central, only on Court TV.
We're in the final stretch as the case against Karen Reed nears its end. Plus, Friday, hear from the loved ones left behind with a voice for victims.
Opening statements with Julie Grant. Mornings at 8/7 Central on Court TV.
The brother and sister murder trial is underway in Tennessee. Siblings Karen and Michael Murray are facing up to life in prison if convicted in the murder and neglect of their mother, Sheila Murray.
Right now, we are hearing opening statements from Karen Murray's defense team, rather. And just as Michael mentioned, there are some of these facts that are difficult to hear, but let's go back in for more.
Photographs of the condition of Miss Murray, and they're not easy to look at. We talked about that in jury selection, too. I won't pretend that they're anything else. They're not easy for anyone to look at. This, her ankle is, it was in terrible condition. There was, I believe, an open compound fracture in it is what had happened. This is the reason that this hadn't been called in before, is the family simply wasn't aware of it. They had bandaged the ankle up a few days before, that they believed she had fallen out of bed, that something had happened to this ankle, and they wrapped it up. She had a history of falling out of bed. Ankle was a little swollen. I think as you hear at least Karen Murray, I think other members, I think either father or brother, one talk about that too, that her ankle was swollen. They wrapped it up. Now, when they unwrap it on the day in question, they find the ankle in the condition it is in. You'll hear Karen Murray in her interview say, if I'd known that her ankle was broken, if I'd seen a bone, if I'd known that was happening, I would have called for help. This ankle was in this condition because they didn't know that it existed this way, that it was in this condition. They didn't know about this break. And why didn't they know about it? In part because of the decline of Sheila Murray. Sheila Murray had gotten to a point by the time that paramedics are there that day to where she was nonverbal. She was, the effects after her stroke, what she suffered from after that, had progressed to a point where she had a very difficult time communicating. Most of the time she was nonverbal. You'll hear multiple people who dealt with her tell you that. Dr. Lawson will tell you about, they evaluated her and that her condition in terms of her awareness wasn't far removed from what they would see in people with traumatic brain injuries in terms of her responsiveness. That while they manipulated her broken ankle at the hospital, she didn't react to it. You'll hear Dr. Lawson say that while they were manipulating this ankle to try to stabilize it, that she wasn't reacting to that while they were doing it. So if someone doesn't respond as you normally would expect, there's a lot of talk about what you would do for a child when a child's crying in jury selection. We talked a lot about that. If you don't know that someone's hurting and they're not able to communicate with you that they're hurting, then how are you supposed to know it? How are you supposed to know? If you don't know about the existence of a condition and this person can't let you know in any of the ways that we typically would think, speaking to you, crying out, whatever, then how are you supposed to know this condition exists? And what do you do when this person you care about, your mother, who you love and who you're trying to do right by, has degraded to a point mentally where she can't tell you what's wrong? What do you do? The family got to a point where they just didn't realize until after the fact how bad the situation had become. And it's easy to apply hindsight to what somebody should have done, could have done this, but the very nature of hindsight is applying knowledge and information that a person didn't have at the time and telling them that they should have known that, they should have done this, while ignoring the condition that people are in while they're actually living it. Now, this family was going through this and they were trying to do right by Sheila. They were trying to. But they were in over their head and they didn't even realize how far over their head they were. The situation in the home was Sheila Murray, Tony Murray, mom and dad, Michael Murray and Karen, their children, staying with them. Tony Murray was the sole source of income. He was the only person who was working. And he was 71 years old when he passed in November of 2019, but he was still working as a security guard. He had a host of he had health issues of his own that prevented him from being as much of a help as I'm certain he would have wanted to be. He ended up dying of kidney failure, and that caused him a great deal of weakness. It plagued him for some time, and it rendered him unable to help as I guess he would probably otherwise have wanted to. Tony Murray, as you heard before, he was before he became a police officer with Johnson City. Tony Murray graduated from ETSU with an accounting degree and then went into the United States Navy, and he served in the Navy for 10 years. Served on the USS Hector, a repair ship that was commissioned in World War II, and the USS Sampson, a guided missile destroyer. At some point in there, he had met and married Sheila Mitchell in 1973. After he got out of the service, after 10 years achieving the rank of lieutenant, he took off that uniform and then he put on a uniform for Johnson City Police Department, where he served for 26 years. So he spent close to 40 years of his life serving first his country and then his community. Tony Murray was a person that knew what it was to swear an oath and then do your best to fulfill it. He was a man who knew what duty and service were. And he was trying to, as the primary decision maker for his home, he was trying to do that for his wife. While recognizing they didn't have the financial ability to put her in a nursing home or to get her, top-notch care, whatever else that was, they were trying to do the best they could. And in fact, that's what Mr. Murray told the first responders that came out in August of 2019. Now, this was a man that, whenever he died, 3 months after his wife of 46 years, he was remembered as the epitome of the strong, silent type. Now, this man was this man who served in the roles he did for his country and his community, was driven to the point of breaking down in tears, telling the paramedics we were doing the best we could with what we had. He was so overcome with his grief and with his sobbing that one of the paramedics asked Mr. Murray if he needed assistance, if he was going to need some sort of care, which he declined. But the situation was such that I believe at that point, Tony Murray realized just how far over their heads they were, that they were naive to believe that they could take care of the situation.
Yeah, can we break for a moment?
All right, let's take this opportunity to bring back in our guest, still with us, Deputy Public Defender Philip Dubé. Philip, I'm reading between the lines a little bit. I want to get your thoughts on this. It sounds like, and this may be the only way to go, they're kind of blaming mom and dad. They said mom couldn't communicate what was going on with her. That's a way of doing that. And dad, specifically, they called him the primary decision maker in the home.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly right. And then you throw into the mix the fact that mom didn't want to be in a nursing home. So what have they really done? If you think about it, Michael, and I don't know if Ashley would agree, they have created the functional equivalent of an advanced healthcare directive without actually memorializing it, getting it signed and witnessed and properly executed and notarized or whatever that formal process is in the state of Tennessee. Those are ultimately her wishes. In essence, no heroics. And it looks like the kids were actually heeding to her wishes, even though it kind of goes against the grain of the greater moral authority. We're all there really to do the best that we can to protect our loved ones or anybody in our care. And I gotta say, on a personal note, this would never happen in Europe. If you really notice, it's a chronic problem across this country that the government doesn't give a darn about the elderly. Yeah. You know, you're really left to your own devices. If you don't have any money, this is the situation you're in. Hopefully, you know, people like her could qualify for that long-term hospice under the Medicare regulations and get the care they need. But if you have parents who are interfering with that process by not allowing the care, by not allowing her to be moved to a nursing home, then what are you supposed to do? Just vacate the premises out of fear that you could be implicated in an aggravated elder abuse case and intentional homicide? It's a tragedy.
Yeah, and you know, I represented the Division of Aging. I'm going to agree with you. There aren't enough resources. The government doesn't do enough for the elderly, but I disagree to say maybe this is more like this is the care that she wanted, the choices she made, because there's a line, and I felt like the defense was even saying, Philip, there was a line being crossed from when they thought they could care for her and realized that they couldn't. And just quickly, to me, that sides with the state. They crossed a line and it became neglect.
All right, but at that point, what do you do? If she won't leave the house, she won't go to a nursing home, they can't just, you know, bail on her, walk out and leave her with no resources. What are they supposed to do? It sounds like they managed the best they could, and they certainly did not have the financial means to bring in a full-time caregiver. Those people can go for $25 an hour, which is $600 a day. And I'm telling you, people like Miss Murray just can't swing it. They don't have the funds.
Yeah, the financials.
They could keep her clean.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Or realize, oh, there's a bone sticking out. We better call EMS. All right, Philip Dubé, as always, thank you so much for joining us.
All right, folks, coming up more from the defense's opening statement in the brother-sister murder trial. We'll be right back. Keep it here on Court TV. Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Michael Ayala.
And I'm Judge Ashley Wilcott. Ahead this hour, the jury reaches a verdict in the penalty phase of the strangled women murder trial in Florida.
Also, we're in verdict watch in the killer or cover-up murder trial in Massachusetts.
And opening statements begin in Court TV's newest case, the horrific brother and sister murder trial in Tennessee.
Now, Karen and Michael Murray are charged with first-degree murder for the alleged neglect of their mother back in August of 2019.
Opening statements continue. We want to head back to court. The defense attorney for Karen Murray is making his statement to the jury.
Circling back to it, though, what you come to find out, I think what the evidence shows in this case is this was a family that got way over its head. And that there's a world of difference between, you know, taking care even of a child and taking care of an adult with the severe issues that Sheila Murray had. You know, saying that anyone could take care of a person like this is like saying that anybody could fight a forest fire. Just drag a hose out there and spray the fire, and that'll take that anybody could fight one. Anybody can do that. When in reality, if you don't know what you're doing, you're fighting a forest fire. All you're going to do is make things worse. You're not going to end up fixing the problem. At best, it's going to stay the same, and at worst, it's going to be a disaster. And that's what happened to this family. You know, this family thought that they could do right by their mother. Michael Murray and Karen Murray thought that they could do right by their mother. They were trying to do right by their mother. But clearly, what they were capable of in terms of the care that they could provide wasn't enough. And they didn't know it until it was too late. Now, that circles back to the beginning, where if the state is able to put on enough proof to try to show the legal definition of neglect, and if you believe that they've shown that, they still have to show that it was done knowingly. And that's where I believe that the state's case will fail. You know, we talked about in jury selection about the legs of the chair, and about if you're missing one, the chair falls over. That's the leg that I think will be missing, that they can't show that either of these defendants were performing the actions that they were knowingly with the intent to neglect their mother. They didn't know they were neglecting her. They thought they were taking care of her. They thought they were doing the best that they could. And unfortunately, it wasn't enough, but they didn't know it until it was too late. But when you look at it, the state will fail to prove that they knowingly did these things, that they knowingly neglected their mother. And when we reach that point, the only option that will be left for you as a jury is to find them not guilty. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Byrd. Mr. Donaldson, would you like to make an opening statement on behalf of Mr. Michael Murray?
Thank you for being here. This is a tragic case. The evidence will show that. The pictures will show that. They're not pretty pictures, but as he has said, they were in over their heads. Michael and Karen Murray, they loved their mother, Sheila. They loved their father, Edwin. They respected them, both of them. And when their father asked them to do something or told them to do something, they did it. This is a family situation. The family was doing the best that they could do with what they had. They didn't even know what they didn't know. There is no knowing crime that was committed by either Karen or Michael, and the evidence will show that. And at the end, the proper verdict is not guilty. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Donaldson. State ready to call its first witness.
State calls John Shelton.
All right, so, Judge, it seems clear the battle lines have been drawn, so to speak, and it's going to really boil down to these legal definitions, trying to convince this jury that, number one, they didn't necessarily neglect her under the law based on what they knew. It wasn't knowing.
Right.
They did the best they could under the circumstances.
And that they were in over their head. Both defense counsel have said that, and that they didn't know enough to know they were neglecting her. And I see the room for that argument. But it's really going to depend on the evidence of what they saw, what they smelled, what they knew was happening to her that was not cared for.
Yeah, and I checked the statute. It's not only what they knew, but what they should have known as well.
What they should have known.
So I think that's important as well, knowing what we heard about what the smell was like and what the EMT saw. Speaking